welcome everyone. This is the sixth session of the Latin American Anthropology seminar series. We are three co-conveners who coordinate the seminar. Ainhoa Montoya at the University of London, Jessie Clare at Cambridge University, who might join us later, and me, Denise Roman, at the University of Aberdeen. The seminar runs fortnightly on Thursdays at 5 p.m. UK time. And we still have two more presentations for this term. We will post some links in the chat box for you to take a look at it. Oh, Jessie's here. Sorry, Jessie. And well, today we have a very interesting presentation by Andrea Gómez from the Universidad Metropolitana Iztapalapa, UAM, in Mexico. She will be speaking for 45 minutes, more or less, or maybe less. Her presentation is titled Multiplicity of Beauty and its Incarnations Through Makeup Use in Mexico City. And before I pass the word to Andrea, after we finalize her presentation, if you have a question that you would like to ask her, you can either type it in the chat box or you can raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand function. I will ask you to unmute yourselves to ask the question. Without further ado, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. Thank you, Denise. I guess beginning my presentation, I am aware I have a strong accent, so if there is something that you don't understand, please type it. Maybe I'm not going to see it immediately, but I will clarify. Okay. So just give me a minute. Well, I'm trying to adjust this, but it's not cooperating. But I'm going to start speaking to you, nevertheless. As Denise said, I studied in Mexico City, and I studied beauty, but I am a Peruvian anthropologist who has done research in Lima and in Mexico City about beauty and cosmetics. And I've been doing this for like 13 years already that I researched this subject. And to me, it was always very clear that beauty was a complex category and one that deserved to be taken into account as an academic subject. However, you can probably imagine that it was thought as superficial. But what I have always pointed out, confronted to these reactions, is that there is no trivial research if they matter to the people with whom we inquire and to the collectivities of which we are members. So in this presentation, I will explore multiple interpretations of beauty and the exploration of its borders in the cosmetic industry in Mexico City. And sorry, I'm reading something to not, talk. So what I'm going to talk to you about, it's based on my doctoral thesis on aesthetic understandings and practices around makeup, whose informants were the employees in charge of direct sale and application in certified establishments. My thesis fieldwork was done in commercial establishments in Mexico City, where employees who carry out direct sales work 7 semi-open interviews, and 9 participant observations were conducted between 2017 and 2018. Although the ethnography was not limited by urban areas, the companies that agreed to participate are mainly aimed at consumers from medium-high socioeconomic sectors, restricting a special coverage to 7 municipalities. My thesis main question was, how do the definitions of beauty and the work of employees in the sale and application of makeup interact and affect each other within the cosmetic offer found in Mexico City? My specific questions were oriented towards the knowledge and strategies of the employees against potential questioning of their work and the intervention of the cosmetic industry in the elaboration and the performance of idealized corporates. For this analysis, I understand aesthetics as the set of values considered appropriate to determine the perception of beauty. Aesthetics enter all spheres of contemporary life, with strong links to individuality and responsibility. Being considered beautiful is a way of positioning the individual in class, racial, and gender hierarchies. So for this thesis, beauty is studied as a subjective and incarnated apprehension, and aesthetics as its normative regulation. The possession of beauty directs our way of participating in a system of aesthetic stratification where beauty results in a dominant and shared experience, emotionally and subjectively, mediated. Its understanding in the aesthetic industry was inherited from Western Europe, where some countries contributed to the formation of an emerging industry in the 19th century. So these concepts are materialized in the work that I observed, which includes active intervention on the bodies of consumers and the workers themselves. Following Whitehead, I approached the body as the first identity reference and a figure that is not completely done, never really. It is constantly affected and undone. In the data collected, the body is understood mostly as instrumental and separate from the subject. But there's also another concept that I am applying to myself right now, that is cosmetics. I understand cosmetics as the discursive, material, and symbolic field under which the presentation of the subject is altered to make him or her embody beauty. Synod explains it is a symbol of status and sexual selection where ugliness is stigmatized and racialized. So here, I'm going to develop my first argument about the multiplicity of beauty, about its racial, class, and political foundations, and how they influence and design its resulting corporates. Sorry if there is noise, but my neighbor is doing I don't know what. But cosmetics and industry cannot be understood only studying the European background of those categories. Therefore, I'm going to talk to you just about one example because it's relevant to my research, but there are many, many more. In the American continent, body paint and various objects were used for purely decorative purposes. Body painting and tattooing were very widespread in American pre-colonization. This skin was thought for non-verbal communication, and on many occasions the border between body painting and cosmetics was and still is very porous. And in Mesoamerica, the Mayans, during their classic period, portrayed women in their art who were later identified as courtesans by the Spanish. placing paints on their lips. Pigments were smeared during acts of commemoration and sacrificial rituals. Their deities were associated with different colors. Tezcatlipoca, the Aztec god of the north, was black, and Huitzilopochtli was blue. By applying the relevant colors to the body, the hope was to appease the gods that might bestow their blessing. In Temazcali, which is a kind of sweat lodge, let's say, employed for curative purposes, pigments of various colors are thought to have been used especially those made from elite for their antiseptic properties. The lustrous ones usually contain an additive, a fragrant additive, which added to their ritual significance. All valuations and practices related to the bodies and to the beauty of American populations became branded as inferior with the arrival of Spanish and then Portuguese colonizers, and were progressively abandoned. After the Spanish conquest, Europeans were deemed beautiful, and their Creole descendants aimed to keep their corporeality as far removed as possible from non-white appearances. In this context, imported cosmetics arrived in America. In the Viceroyalty of New Spain, their public use was met with a pejorative gaze by Spanish natives and their descendants due to a moralistic vision of the Mediterranean system of honor. By the 19th century, cosmetics came to signal the reporter's luxury of leisure, and hence a necessity to distance oneself from poverty via its consumption. The shared aesthetic standards of producers and cosmetic users coincided also with the eugenic currents of the 19th and 20th centuries. So, what? Oh, okay. As I was saying, centuries of perpetrating this particular understanding of beauty culminate in the intuitive, if imagined, assignation of physical, social, and moral attributes to whiteness in contemporary Mexico. The whitened, and I say whitened because that's something we can talk about if they are really whitened. The whitened profiles of women in cosmetic advertising are discussed since the 60s, yet with few exceptions, the industry has not moved towards a significantly more ethnically diverse representation. In my ethnography, the word race or racism was hardly mentioned during fieldwork. Workers seem to be instructed to not confront it directly. But even if it's not recognized as such in the discourse, it is found in the techniques and corporatives that the workers use. They admitted that they do reproduce idealized morphologies of the body, such as making the nostrils narrower. A worker stated, "I like to take the shadow out of the eye socket, but always keeping a balance on the lower eyelid. If not, it will give a very Asian effect." The use of makeup aims to reproduce shapes and angles on the face that are directly linked to race and ethnicity, meaning the attributed difference is not only supposedly biological, but historical, geopolitical, cultural, and more. In the case of Asian beauty, for example, I'm just going to mention it very quickly, it was very interesting that when they talked about Asian beauty, they are not talking about the Chinese diaspora here in Mexico or other present diasporas. They are talking about South Korean companies and South Korean famous celebrities. And they are talking about them because they have become aspirational. And because if we compare it to other diasporas here, they don't have a background of being marginalized, or at least not as marginalized as others, such as the Chinese diaspora here, for example. So going back to what I was saying, the use of makeup aims to reproduce shapes and angles on the face that are, as I said, directly linked to race and ethnicity, and then the adjustment of the body to exact appraisals brings with it the idea that the body is measurable and moldable. This perspective, where science as a European heritage arrived in Latin America from colonial imposition, was used for the benefit of elites and still exists in the studied contexts, justifying and naturalizing class and ethnic ascriptions while encouraging the desire to recreate representations of recognizable subjects from an exclusive standard of, among other values, beauty. This background generated politically and socially correct formulas that maintain racism on a daily basis. In my ethnography too, at one of the South Korean companies that I included, I was told that they sell serums and skincare and skin makeup, but they don't sell as well in Mexico. And they've been here, well, the company has been here for 15 years already. They told me that they don't sell because they leave the skin very bright, which is a sign of beauty and youth in South Korea. In Mexico, this characteristic is related to the denial of indigenous beauty and its cosmetic practices. In Chiapas, Chamula women, for example, still use oils on the skin in order to fit the image of a robust woman prepared for hard work. But self-identified mestizo women understood putting oil as a corrientada, a signal of rejection and discrimination. And when I asked, I was told repeatedly that a shiny skin is a dirty skin. And when I kept pushing, I almost invariably got the association with indigenous women. So what I'm describing here also has obviously racial connotations, but it also has political connotations. In Mexico and in Latin America, the privileged position of whiteness on the class spectrum idealizes it. So those with lighter skin color have on average higher wages and a higher level of education compared to individuals with darker skin tones, contributing to an unequal distribution of opportunities, which also contain the access to political power, to governmental positions, to everything you need to obtain in order to participate in politics. Moreover, aesthetic appreciation smoothly aligns with the collective aspiration of an ethnically mixed society towards white bodily appearances. Again, I'm reinforcing that I did this fieldwork on Mexico, that is a country whose foundational myth subjects all Mexicans to the mixed race identity of mestizo, based on the narrative of an allegedly complete merge of indigenous peoples and colonies to form the racially superior Bronze race, where others, meaning Asians, Africans, indigenous peoples not from Mexico or not recognized as from Mexico, and more simply do not belong. But there's also another thing that's been populating here and that I would like to touch on, and that is health. Health and youth, but first health. The exalted assessment of health and youth was notorious during the ethnography, which comes from the close link between cosmetics, anatomy, and medicine. The last two convey ways of understanding the body by dividing it and providing it with the specific rules under which they would work. From there, the beauty industry gets vocabulary for body and face parts, as well as parameters that make beauty calculable. Those notions are sold as aspirational values that require not only not only technologies on the body, but socially recognizable actions that work to align the body space with the social space, as Sarah Ahmed says. Health as an aesthetic marker was registered through the answers of workers when I asked about the goal of applying makeup. In practice, perfect skin was almost universally mentioned as an aesthetic principle. Healthy meaning matching the entire face with foundation in a single color, large skin using highlighters to give the impression that the skin is hydrated and nourished and without signs of disease. Rosacea, vitiligo, acne were mentioned. Or age, fine lines, for example. Consumers respond to aesthetic norms where non-disclosure of makeup is praised while hiding part of the body. Natural beauty was elevated above any transitory fashion. Quoting Edmonds, what represents health is established through a process in which aesthetics and the physiological state of the body become linked in makeup application. There is fluidity between beauty and health, but that can also be dangerous when the first begins to be conceived as the requirement of the second one. All interviewees responded to the idea that inherent beauty exists. So what that means is that everybody's beautiful according to them, and what you need is cosmetics to just let it all out. This is strongly related to the outer appearance of what a healthy body is supposed to look like and to youthfulness without requiring the actual personification of physical health or chronological age. So in this case, youthfulness is one of the corporeal signs to be acquired that allows self-identification with an idealization of youth and a youthful face, meaning rosy cheeks, plump lips, smooth skin, without sunspots or wrinkles, according to the interviewees. Not only signs of aging, but tiredness were also brought about. And this idea that everything that signals that you're tired must be hidden, like eyeliner on the inner corner of the eye, that is the color of the skin. It removes, apparently, all traces of bodily signs of labor, including the workers' labor. They told me about how they do certain makeup techniques on themselves so nobody could notice that they have been working from 8 a.m. and when I was talking to them, it was already 7 p.m. and they were going to still be working. So, yeah. Findings about youthfulness, health, and beauty stood out also not only in makeup, but in skincare, which was expected actually, because it was one of the ways, skincare was one of the ways that the cosmetic industry gained legitimacy, linking itself to practices approved by the medical sector. While the hygiene and cosmetics market segments developed in parallel, Beauty was assimilated with cleanliness and in turn with whiteness. Cosmetics and body cleansing products were introduced as Western contributions to civilized, colonized peoples, eliminating existing hygiene practices of Asian, African, and American societies. For example, the Inca Empire practiced bathing, and they had these monumental stone baths that the Inca used to employ, and the Spaniards, in many cases, destroyed them all because they associated them with Moros. They associated them with, well, Middle Eastern people that invaded them previously. But there are still plenty of them in Cusco, if you are wondering. What I'm talking about, youthfulness, health, beauty, also links to class. Because those who possess beauty and can let it out through natural beauty are already close to the aesthetic preferences reproduced by the workers. They are preferred as customers, and over those clients whose perceived ugliness is a source of social exclusion and a sign of poverty. The skin and the embodiment of beauty becomes the material proof of lifestyle and purchasing power. Now I'll begin with another part of my presentation, and don't worry, the first one was supposed to be long in order for you to understand what I'm going to say next. That is that these appearances are not unilaterally imposed by the cosmetic sector, but that they are rebuffed and criticized by clients and by a certain segment of makeup producers. Oh, you cannot see what I'm doing, right? This. Very interesting, I'm gonna show you. Okay. In Latin America, fragmented symbolic fields are not unambiguously subordinated to dominant classes and cultures. They rather interrelate under unequal conditions. From what I found in Mexico, but also from what I found in Lima, in Peru, it is not possible to speak of a cosmetic industry that simply imposes aesthetic models to imitate. Also, that would mean that the industry is unified, which is not. What I research is only the formal side, the people that have authorizations to sell. And I did not include catalog sales, which are part of more than 70% of the market, of the cosmetic market in Mexico. So, oh, you got called. So, it's there. I'm talking about the cosmetic industry for me to explain it in an easier way to you. But to be honest, if we say the cosmetic industry, we have to be more specific. Okay, so what I was saying was that instead what I found is that clients and practitioners find themselves with a number of information inputs and repertoires of cosmetic practices to select and adapt to their own predilections. Here, what I found was the concept of style, which basically was, according to Rowe, a structured and intentional system of selective elements within certain realms to create a pleasant versatility within a behavioral corpus made of artifacts. Style, in a concrete way, basically, was a process of creating information through differentiation. In participant observations, there was a consensus on the permissiveness of experimenting always respecting certain norms and certain idealized bodily shapes. Through trial and error, consumers and also the sellers themselves would find their own styles, but they often came into conflict with each other, and the vendors, they usually ended up judging the shoppers about their own personal style. They couldn't say it, but they judged them, and they told me. Brands have integrated local preferences into their portfolios, albeit handing over to the workers who face the public the negotiation of the subjective demands of consumers and the discourses of their sector. One interesting case and one very interesting word that I found was coverage, cobertura, which according to the workers meant high durability and pigmentation, but in practice it implied the obvious use of makeup with color. For one employee, these are idiosyncratic preferences of Mexican clients. He says that there are products, he's talking about the company that employs him. There are certain products that we have in Asia and that we sell that we don't have here. Moisturizers, sunblock, but you bring it to Mexico and it's like, no, give me makeup, something that covers me, something that coats me. Users want to demonstrate they incorporate beauty patterns through coverage, while workers reject this practice for going against learned aesthetic principles like perfect skin. Demand seems to obey the prescription of a skin that embodies aesthetically and socially accepted versions, but also the ostentation of applied makeup. Additionally, several clients I witnessed were very attentive to not buy lighter shades, and it was a reason to not acquire certain makeup. While there certainly exists a large demand for whitening skincare or purifying skincare, as they call it here, and lighter makeup in many establishments that I visited, the brand's middle and upper class clientele either were already perceived as white or light-skinned or did not gain any material benefits, from looking whiter. So the local preferences I witnessed demonstrate that skin color is not enough to comprehend aesthetic ideals and its subsequent cosmetic practices. Okay, I'm going to go on. The word inclusion arose in the launch of a highly demanded brand while I was doing field work. It stood out at that time for its variety of available foundation shades. Many of the darker shades do not typically feature in mainstream makeup brands, which generated overt criticism. And some producers have embraced it, mostly those who do not self-identify as white and those who do not come from the global north. Still, they do recover the scientific and anatomical vocabulary of their peers. What health and youth entail is much less questioned. And when I did my ethnography, it was pushed forward in advertising as a reason to consume cosmetics, as a synonym to beauty. At this point, I'll present something that I left until the end deliberately. Those employed to receive makeup applications in the demonstrations, master classes, congresses that I went to were almost always slim, young, very light-skinned women. The complexion of the models demonstrated that makeup offered, but also embodied aesthetic and gendered expectations. The vast majority of informants described the clientele as almost exclusively cisgender women. The painted appearances were all focused on their physiognomies and made to be more feminized. As in a certain makeup class, wherein that was indicated that the blush was not placed vertically due to the risk of forming a square and looking more masculine, but in this way. In the materiality of the body, there are certain processes that are thought as necessary processes of repetition in order to maintain what a woman is. On very few occasions, the use of makeup on men was alluded to, but it was justified that either they would use makeup without color, actually, just like this one, that is a translucent powder made of rice. That is actually, there is an advertising here in Mexico City for men, for this one. Blended, that it's supposed that this makeup is for men because it blends with the skin, because nobody will notice. Well, so they say. Or that men that use makeup are homosexual men, because according to those interviewed, heterosexual men do not use makeup except for exceptional reasons. Acne, wedding day, graduation day were mentioned. There is still a great disconnection between gender and social expectations towards men to participate in cosmetic consumption, and lots of stereotyping, because how exactly could workers recognize if a man is straight? In contrast, most of makeup workers were men. There were also more male makeup artists and more saleswomen in the visited establishments. For several interviewees, women enter this industry because they have a certain familiarity with makeup, which was contradicted by the women that I interviewed, all saleswomen too. The most prevalent explanation was the sexual orientation of male makeup artists. Their assumed homosexuality would bring them closer to gender knowledge and would provide them with a feminine quality that not everyone was comfortable with. There were a couple of employees that made sure to declare during the interview that they were straight, and they put a lot of emphasis on it. And they even got to the point of saying that even if they are interested in the beauty industry, they do want to be recognized as heterosexual men. But there was lots of emphasis. With the women that I interviewed and the women that I talked to during participant observations, this was never the case. Like sexual orientation, they never brought it up as a subject that they want me to register. Male homosexuality is conceived as an escape from hegemonic masculinities, and they demonstrate biases regarding gender and sexuality that continue to fall into undoubtedly harmful binaries. This part of the research was the most invariable, and where there was almost no concern about excluding potential buyers or of possibly offending anyone. At the same time, though, the constant discrimination and exclusion of resources experienced by the LGBTQ plus population in Mexico lead them to enter sectors with pre-established support networks, such as cosmetic stores, where also expressions of their identities are not completely limited. They do not necessarily have to perform heterosexuality if they work in these stores. So, to conclude, I think the interventions in the body that occur through makeup, and through material intervention reflect how beauty is conceptualized and that there is no single version of it among the cosmetic sector. Each actor intervenes in its redefinition. There are values imposed by the historical, political, and racial background of the cosmetic industry, such as health and youth. This translates into desired corporealities with idealized and naturalized features. The interpretations of both concepts are particular and interact with the local demand for faces and bodies that show the use of makeup. However, alternative actions and perspectives were presented without necessarily being openly critical of the industry, as well as local preferences to which producers appeal in their offer and advertising. Although there are a great variety of aesthetically regulated incarnations, the shared archetype of beauty still presents more coincidences than challenges to heteronormative corporalities where the category woman is naturalized as cisgender. The difference appears in those who personify the feminized demand and supply of the sector, being placed in set polarity by gender identity and sexual orientation, respectively. Through aesthetic arrangements, as Cruz states, a complex form of transit is navigated. Being beautiful is the culmination of a process of cultural incarnation. That's it.